Hello and welcome to another episode of the Curious and Cultured podcast. And I want to go further and deeper, in what we need to talk about, which is about peaks. So Damali, tell me, what was, in your own words, your peak?
It was definitely sixth grade, when my whole school was looking at me. Okay. Miss Texas was there and she was singing. And I was like, can I sing? Right. And then I went ahead and got the mic and then I sang and it was amazing. Okay. And everyone stood up and they were so surprised. Right. That was the peak. Sixth grade, I was like 11 or 12. Right. And then, after that, I just turned to dust, nothing else mattered after that moment in time.
Wow. Wow.
I know.
Wow.
And for you, what about for you? What was your peak?
I feel like my peak must have been when I performed my preeminent Michael Jackson impersonation dance performance at the one and only talent show in my junior high school,
Yes.
And I mean, Michael himself couldn't make it, but there were people there who did make it, right? And I danced to Want to Be Starting Something. And it definitely started something for me with my peak, And then after that, I became the wall. So I could never be off the wall.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So beautiful and poignant.
I know. All right. Well, that ends our skit. Thank you so much. That's the end of the episode. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, we're done. Packing it up.
All right. Hey, welcome to another episode. I am Dagny.
And I'm Damali.
And in this episode, we wanted to have some fun with you at the beginning. That's where the skit was coming from. But also, It takes into what we want to talk about during this episode, which is this concept of peak. Either society's definition of a peak, our own conditioning of when do we peak in life? Do peaks even exist? Can we define our own peaks? That's what we're going to be diving into. And we want to take it from, as always, when we're connecting dots, a macro to micro level. So when we look at peaks or give examples, we tend to automatically bring up celebrities, public figures, icons, legends, those people. Yeah. And we tend to very quickly insist we know the peaks of their career trajectories, which is fascinating because we'll go further into why that's so fascinating and possibly influencing the conditioning, where we then go to the second part of our discussion, where we talk about as individuals, as peoples, how do peaks look like in our own lives? How are we influenced by this either celebrity culture, or we might even bring in capitalism culture, because it's possible peaks have quite a connection to this ideology of capitalism. And what can we do about maybe do better with it? So in this episode, we're not trying to convince you to forget about peaks and just throw it all away vibes at all, but wanting to invite you to possibly consider alternative perspectives on how to navigate, define, or even celebrate your own peaks in your life and in your community. So that's what we're getting into in this episode. So to start, what inspired us for this discussion was a particular video, which of course I will share a link to in the show notes and the blog post for this episode. And it was a clip about Morgan Freeman. And wait, should I throw this back to you, Damali, or should I go ahead and
you can. Yeah. I guess. Okay. I found there's an Instagram video I found of Morgan Freeman, and then I went ahead and shared it with the rest of my family. And you can go ahead. You can explain the.
So in this clip, you see short clips of Morgan Freeman throughout his career. Now, first, and it will say like how the year and how old he was and what his net worth was at that time. Now, first of all, this was a shocking clip for me because I've only known Morgan Freeman as being old. I never knew that obviously he's human, right? So obviously he must have been young at some point in time. But all my life, I only saw this man as an older man. So I was very like, wow, this brother used to be a younger person too, and skinny and all of that. Okay, sir. So what was fascinating to see was that I think he started in his 20s or like really early 20s in trying to do this acting or talk show or just something in front of the camera. And his net worth throughout his 20s and 30s and possibly even 40s was almost like either zero or kind of minimal. And then you see in the clip when he gets up to his 50s, 60s, and 70s, that is where his net worth is like millionaire vibes. And I also took note of how you could see, I know he's an actor, so obviously he's a very preeminent, prominent, profound actor with his very signature voice. But you can also see in the clips how I don't know if this is what money does to you or this is what success does to you, but you can see how he seems even more like embodied or comfortable with who he is as he progresses in his 60s and 70s kind of thing. While it seems like the bracket of the 20s to maybe the 40s, you can tell that actually possibly he was still trying to figure all of this out, like figure out where does he fit, what is the actual formula for his specific success, right? And I found, which also Damali will note also what she found with that too, but I found that that's actually a really beautiful illustration of what a certain aspect of success could be. And we don't only have to see it in the lens of, people who want to be quote unquote famous, but it's possible that even with an agent or a manager or a whole team, maybe your 20s up to your 40s is the bracket where you are figuring it out, experimenting, trying everything, studying everything, learning everything. And you're not necessarily a failure if no particular so-called peak happened at that time. Because to me, I know to that, like we all mostly, when I say Morgan Freeman, you think, oh yeah, successful actor. But seeing that video was like, wow, he actually has been committed for a really long time before getting to the point of even everybody automatically assumes he is successful. And when you put it in that, and I think in particular, because they put the dates and the age bracket to show like this took decades. It wasn't an overnight thing. It wasn't, here's my 5-year plan and I'm there. It was like, this took 30, 40 years to get to that point. And I thought it would be interesting to even find out from Morgan Freeman himself, does he feel successful now? The video made it seem like success is your net worth. Because so much money is in the bank, that means he's successful. I'm not sure if Morgan himself, Mr. Morgan himself, agrees with that, if that's how he sees his peak, or is there something else he's still pushing for? But I think it does show that at least he has that, the combination of audacity and patience, because he could have dropped it and go work at a bank or something at any point in time. Like he didn't have to continue because it took so long. So this is where like the dots were starting to connect because of watching that clip. So before we get into further discussion, I wanted to also throw it back to Damali to continue speaking on what spoke to you with this clip and how it got us to this point of having this conversation.
Right. Yeah. So I really thought that, to add about the Morgan Freeman thing, I was like, wait, he used to be young? Like, what? What's going on? Like, I don't understand. He's always been old this whole time. But I think it's important to note that I feel like he became more famous later on. Like, it wasn't like immediate fame. It was kind of like after his 20s and 30s, I think. And I feel like in society, we tend to do that thing where, you have to make it in your 20s or you won't make it at all, 20s, 30s, or else you're never going to make it kind of thing. And I wonder, we start to talk, like thinking about, well, maybe does it have to be our peak, right? For us, or in this case, more for like celebrities or successful people, like, is that the only age bracket that we can reach a peak? And then obviously it's not true, because some people are able to make it at a different time. Morgan Freeman comes to mind. Also, the singer Sia, Sia Chandelier, also comes to mind, where Sia had been around for a long time, right? For very young, she had been, but she blew up a lot later. Like, I feel like 30s, like 40s, where she really, blew up, like, all, worldwide kind of thing, and had like really big success. So it made us think about, oh, okay, well then your peaks can be different. They don't all have to be just in that, a very young age bracket. So, and we know that society has a lot to do with why we feel this way, right? And what we see in our media and books. And it's always this idea of like, oh my gosh, you have to become successful at this time, like hurry up. Like, as if there's like a window, and if you miss, I was gonna say jump out, but that maybe is not the best metaphor. If you miss jumping in, you miss jumping in the window, then that's it, right? The sliver is gone. It makes me, it's kind of random, but it makes me think of, in the movie with Will Smith, was it I Am Legend, where there was a moment, oh, spoiler alert. So there's a moment where he's hanging from this building or something. He got caught in some trap, and there's like a sliver of sun on the ground, and like there's these scary creatures coming to get him. And once once it's dark, they can attack, right? And so I think spoiler alert, I think they end up attacking, and he tells his own dog to leave, because then he'll be attacked by the other creepy zombie dogs. So that sliver of light is what makes me think, like, the metaphor of like, oh, once that little bit of light is gone, once your 20s are over, oh no, you should just, like, similar to our skit before, you should just curl up and die, and like just dust, and there's nothing else for you, and life is kind of not right. Even though we also have this thing in media that, like, oh, life is a journey, right? And it's never ending. You just keep on going. It never ends. But yet, excuse me, we also have this other part where, no, you have to. I mean, yes, I agree. Obviously, yes, in life, it does help to, plan things at a certain extent, and to not just, stay stagnant. But I think, you don't have to. I feel like life is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's not supposed to be in like little spurts, and then that's it, right? So yeah, so it made us kind of want to dive more into that, and also talk about the differences, right? Because successful people, like celebrities, are very different from us, normal humans, right? And the way that their definitions are very, very different. Right. So I don't know if should I dive more into that? Or do you want to say more about that point?
I think that's a perfect segue. Thank you to going into,
yes.
Let's speak more on, like I noted earlier, we're going to go macro and speaking on how celebrity culture and the people we put up in pedestals when it comes to public figures and icons kind of influences this conditioning about peaking. So yes, go ahead and go into that we'll start with this concept with celebrities. Yeah.
Yes. Right. Yeah. So there is this thing we have this romanticized kind of relationship of celebrities, which makes sense, right? Because they kind of are there they are kind of there for entertainment, right? But we like to paint this picture of like, oh, like we love the underdog, but like only if they make it at a certain time. Like if you're the underdog and then you make it, then it's great, right? Or we like, what's that term we like? Like overnight success. Like we love that term, even though we all know it's very rare. Like overnight success is not really real. You have to work to get there. You can't just like get out of the womb and immediately you have the success. You know what I mean? So we have people that make me the people that I guess I could say made it in their 20s, right? We have like Adele, right? We have Adele, right? We have BTS, right? Adam Lambert, Lady Gaga, Rihanna, Snoop Dogg, all these people that have made it at I guess a good age, right, in their 20s, and they are able to continue, or they do different things. Taylor Swift comes to mind as well. Even younger, she was a teenager, right? So we kind of like, it's like, oh, so then we do this thing where, oh, that's the right way to be successful. That's the right way. Like if you get success and you become a celebrity in your 20s, then you're really, that is your peak, right? And but what I thought was, I guess, like interesting with that is that some of these celebrities, they either continued peaking afterward, or they want to pivot and have a different type of success or a different type of pivoting, right? So I think I heard recently that like Adele, I think, is a good example. She kind of, I don't think she's really fallen. Like somehow the marketing is so good that Adele will do an album, leave, fall off the face of the earth for like 5 years, and then she comes back with 20, 25, 30. And I'm just like, wait, man, wait, hold on. Oh my God, she's past 30. She's past the time to peak, and yet she still continues peaking. Like every time she comes out, number ones all across the board, right? And I kind of think about how, yes, it's her, but I also think there's a marketing behind that, right? There's a team behind that. There are agents behind that. I wonder does she agree with this? Does she agree that she has been peaking this whole time? Like how does she see that? Because there's so much behind that. And then even she, as she's getting older, she has been talking about wanting to pivot, to do something different, to still show art, but not with music. Like she wants to do something different, right? And I guess another example too is Lady Gaga is a good example also, where she kind of has been like pivoting and going to movies and doing different things. And then lastly, I could bring up like Adam Lambert, where now he had a unique situation because obviously back then, nowadays I feel like gay artists have a little bit like they don't get canceled the way that Adam Lambert was canceled. But for him, like, I think he's really cool because he was a really huge star, right, in his later 20s, right? And then later kind of fell off because of all the drama and scandal, but he's still doing his thing. He's not like the biggest person now. He's not on the radio all the time. But I wonder if he would think, oh, this actually is my peak because I'm able to do what I want to do. And I've been able to continue growing and evolving and things like that. And so I think other people I think about are like, oh, who else can we talk about? Michael Jackson, Beyonce, or Taylor Swift, where I don't, did their peak ever kind of end, right? Like it just keeps on, especially for Beyonce and Taylor Swift who are still alive, but their peaks never end. It's like there's never like a drop in the success. But I wonder, is that them? Is that their team? Like what keeps them continuing to grow and grow? And so it's like, okay, if they're continuing, and as far as my knowledge, Beyonce and Taylor Swift are no longer in their 20s, but yet they're still on the top, right? And no one is ever like, oh my God, Taylor Swift is just get up. Like no one says that. They're just, and so that of course made us think like, okay, well then the definition of this peak thing and success is not as straight and narrow as we had thought. So I think that's the first thing I would say about that.
Yes. I like how you noted in terms of celebrities and how we determine their peaks, which again, I feel is also I don't want to say a gimmick, but also possibly maybe, like you said, part of the packaging and the marketing where, oh, this next album, is it better than the last one? If we're talking about musicians. Oh, if this movie, is it better than the last movie that they did? We're talking about actors. Oh, did they do the race better at this Olympics than the last one? If you're talking about athletes. And noting that I feel that further perpetuates for individuals influenced on the conditioning of this, like this need for competing. Like your peak has to do with competition. And I do think that even though I'm sure we all understand that, well, with celebrities, it is different because they technically are being exploited for our entertainment. So it's not just like the trajectory of their careers, like what makes one a one-hit wonder and the other one where even way after they're dead, we're still listening to them and their streams still be making a whole bunch of money. Is it really just because the person, one individual, that was supposed to be their story? Or is it more of like, well, actually, this was the package that they signed up for, and that's why some are here and some are not, kind of thing? I'm not sure yet, but I do feel like when we are going to gradually now be taking the conversation to how we're dealing with this as individuals or people who may not have an entire team and company and package behind us to be peaking. What does that mean when we are trying to run that same race? Like the saying that, like the meme or something of like, well, if Beyonce has 24 hours, she has the same 24 hours as you. So what excuse do you have? And it's like, well, no, I'm not saying I have an excuse. I'm just saying that's a different type of 24 hours. Okay, it's a little different. We're in different time zones over here. All right. So making it seem like so you should be able to compete at this level is a bit. To me, it almost gives like Hunger Games vibes almost, or Divergent vibes, where it's like you're being set up for a race that you actually are not equipped for or really will not serve you. And then we end up spiraling, which is now taking the conversation to more as individuals, spiraling in this rhetoric or debate on feeling lost or feeling you haven't accomplished anything or feeling, well, if this milestone has passed and didn't happen by this age, failure, game over. And that's it. And I think that is unfortunate. I've noted, okay, like and also the decades. Well, in your 20s should be only about this. Your 30s should only be about that. Your 40s should only be about this, that, the other. And I'm not sure how many of us are really following that criteria. I don't know how many of us are following that schedule. And I think what I would like for us to even dive in deeper in this conversation is understanding, where does this scheduling come from when it comes to peaks? Where do these expectations come from, and are they serving us? And when I say that, I don't only mean, now I am taking it to segueing away from celebrities to speaking about ourselves. I feel like we can utilize bigger people or icons as some form of inspiration, right? Like, I want to do my version of a masterpiece of some kind in whatever field you are focused on or whatever aspect of your life you're focused on. And maybe a particular artist's album can be the soundtrack for that, or that particular movie can be the wardrobe inspiration for that. But the focus, once you have your Pinterest board and soundtrack inspiration set up, I feel the focus that needs to shift on being more intentional about how you are defining what are peaks in your life and whether you need to be peaking at all. And for me, when I observe real people, which I'm sure you listening may resonate with this, do you recall ever when like you might be talking to somebody and you notice that the stories they share about what they feel is something they have accomplished in their life, where do they go in that story? For some people, they go way back to like high school or grade school, that some particular thing, it was a science project or a school play or something. In their mind, that was the most ultimate success story for them. And they always go back to that as something to share that they did, that to show that they did something. And now, granted, if the person you're speaking to who's doing this and they're maybe like 22 years old, you're like, oh, I mean, you did just graduate a few years ago. But if they're 86 years old, you're like, wait, what happened in between high school and now that is still the thing you reach back for? As if in your mind, that's the only milestone that mattered at all. And I bring this up because sometimes people, I've noticed how sometimes people will like dismiss that or mock that or make it seem like, oh my gosh, you obviously have nothing going on in your life if the only thing you can speak to is like some school project you did in high school. Like, get a life. Or that means you were popular in high school, so you peaked. That means you are of no relevance afterwards. And I think that's unfortunate. I don't think that's the best way to look at it. Now, granted, if they were like a mean bully person in high school and all of you know that because you're still living in the same city, I mean, okay, then maybe we can give a little bit of a bombastic side eye because why were you being mean to people in high school? But that's an exception. But for everybody else who might be in this of like, if someone's asking you like what point in your life did you feel like you were really successful or that you peaked or you really did something, for those who have to reach back like that, to me sometimes I feel like it's not so much about nothing else happened between they were 15 then and now they're 105. I'm just making the bracket bigger so you understand the note, right? Because I don't want to like yell at anybody if you're actually 105 years old listening to this. But if they have to reach back like that, maybe it's not so much that this is their only success story. Maybe life really changed after graduating. Maybe that was the only time they felt seen. Maybe that was the only time they had people around them that supported them. Maybe responsibilities after that kind of caused a fade out of the vibrance in their life. Like there's so many other things that could have occurred that or circumstance that could have happened that does not necessarily mean the person has nothing to offer or the person must be so lame if the only thing they can bring up is high school. It's possible the trajectory of their life changed a lot after high school. And I feel like if you are really into the conversation, that's something to dig into, of asking, okay, so like why did that happen? At the same time, peaks also, in terms of conditioning, peaks also come in the frame of we feel successful because there's a certain amount in the bank account. We feel successful because some other entity has validated us. And that's where I think of those lists, 30 under 30 influential people, or the 20 under 20 most successful people, where they like put you in these age brackets claiming you've succeeded at something at a certain time, which makes it seem like you have now peaked. And I think that the issue with that for me is that it can kind of make us influence us to feel like we are running out of time, or makes it more difficult to even celebrate ourselves. Because if we haven't made it to that list, obviously there's nothing else. We have done nothing. Like we should just go back to sleep and never wake up, because why? We're not in the list. We haven't made it, and that sort of thing. So there's more I want to say about that, but I want to throw it back to you, Damali, in terms of this notion of peaking in the conditioning we have, peaking in our own lives as individuals. And then later we can go into like ourselves of like, I would like to ask you what you think your peak has been. But first, let's go into, in general, as a society, as real people, how we've been influenced or conditioned when it comes to what do peaks and milestones should look like in our lives.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I first want to circle back to one point before. I'm going to discuss about dead people. That just came to mind now. But yeah, I also, when it comes to peaks, I also think about people like Sir Isaac Newton, or like MLK, Albert Einstein, John Keats, Herman Melvin, the Moby, all these people that have died many, many years ago, but we're still talking about them. We still bring up Albert Einstein in class all the time, Sir Isaac Newton. We're still using the stuff that he told us and all of that, and or Shakespeare. And I always want, and a lot of times these kind of artists and people, like, they didn't get anything when they were alive. Like they died sick or poor, or like no one cared about them. Like I know for Moby Dick, no one, like they were ahead of their time, right? And it made me kind of wonder, like, or people like Da Vinci or Beethoven, like, how did they feel about their peaks? Do they think that they made their peak that even when they were like poor or dying? Or I know John Keats was like dying when he was writing his stuff. And it's been like centuries go by and we're still discussing these people. And the only thing we only talk about one part of them, right? Like, for Shakespeare, there's many things he's written, but there's main plays that we talk about, right? Or for Da Vinci, it's like we talk all about his painting and in Mona Lisa, but what about the other things he did? So I always want, I mean, obviously we can't ask them, but I think that's a different shift, right? Because like, how many people nowadays will have that, where a century later we'll still talk about this huge big thing that they did? So I just thought that was interesting too. That also came to mind about, like, did these dead people think that they peaked? What do they think? Like Malcolm X to MLK, like how do they feel about that, and how would they feel if they were, I mean, if they're dead but they're looking down and looking at society and be like, what did they Like, how do they feel about that? So that also, which of course we can't think about because we're alive. Obviously, it's a little bit different, but that also came to my mind as well. And then when it comes to like us and not like, other, one in a million type people or celebrities and things like that, our peaks are very different, right? Because like we don't have a whole team behind us creating the success story for us all the time. We don't have, we're not in the media all the time about like what our peaks are, right? We just kind of, our peaks are more of like, certain, specific things like, I don't know, a performance you did, or I guess like a graduation, right? Like things like graduation or a big job, or I guess getting married or having a kid, or like I think things like that society kind of treats as like, okay, this is your peak, blah blah blah. When you've made this or you have this certain title, then blah blah blah. Um, and I think that that can be it's understanding, but I think sometimes it could be damaging because like then we have that thought, if I don't have those things or I didn't do those things or it didn't work out, does that mean I failed and it's not a peak anymore? Like when does it stop being, when do I stop being on that ledge kind of thing? Although I feel like when it comes to peaks, we should probably use it more as like when big things happen, we should use it as a learning exercise, like learn from it and then move on, right? And then I think I like what you brought up about people that like there are 80 and you're still bringing up high school, and people sometimes laugh at that or be like, why are you still bringing up things that happened so for but sometimes I think sometimes it could be one, maybe it's some regret that they wish that could have lasted longer, or it's like, I wish I could do something like that again, or I was really shining at that time and I really like that time and I haven't been able to shine in a certain way since, right? Because maybe you had a dream to do something, but then life happened and you need to do other things or change your trajectory. And maybe you didn't want to change it, but then things happen, right? Like, and maybe, there was a lack in resources or economics or motivation or something, right? And then 40 years go by and you're like, oh, damn, I really, like that time, right? So I think we really wanted to like dive into how can the whole, I guess, feeling towards a peak or understanding of it, how can it be in a more positive way where it's not, where we can talk about peaks without, I guess, or I guess I'd say like how to make it more inclusive for people, I think is what I'm trying to say. Because when we do this thing where you have to do this, this, and this to peak, then the rest of us are like, oh, okay, that's fine, right? I'll just go under a rock now. Like what, what else am I supposed to do, right? And then also, I guess I can start with well, I'll let you continue with that first, but I'll start with me a little bit where I can even though I'm not 80, but I do know there are certain parts or times in my life that were like really awesome, like really, really awesome things that happened. And if that awesome thing ends and it didn't continue, then I'm like, I always go back to it. I'm like, oh, I wish I could have done that again, or I wish I did something, or like, when am I going to feel that high again, kind of thing. About like not really high. I mean, like like the peak, right? Not actually. We're not condoning anything. You're not condoning getting high here. I mean, to each their own, right? Just kidding. But yeah, so I think about that too. There are things in my life where I talk about all the time, and I have friends or family being, "Oh my God, Damali, why are you always talking about this?" I'm like, "Because it was such an awesome time," and it stays in my head, right? And then there's also the other thought about how in my 20s, where you're supposed to make some big peak, I felt like, I don't know, the beginning of my 20s and the end were very different. Because in the beginning, it was like, oh, okay, I'm ready to do this. I have all this stuff. And then like it ended. I'm like, oh, college. And then it ends. Oh, I got my big job. And then it ends. Like things kept on like ending or changing or switching in my 20s. And so I was kind of like, wait, where's the, I thought like, it's like a lot of times in my 20s, it was like, I thought I was at a peak. But then when it didn't work out anymore, it was no longer a peak because I, left a job or something, or I had a leadership role of something in college, but I don't anymore. Or like I had a bunch of friends at a certain time, but then they all left. And so I'm by myself. Like that, things kept on like changing and going up and down and stuff. And like, I I think about, and of course, if I ever see, because of course, Facebook loves to remind you of things that you don't ask for, right? And like pictures of in my 20s will come up, and in the picture, it looks like, oh wow, it's so, it looks so great in the picture. And then now I'm kind of like, oh, but like I'm no longer there anymore, so I can't really, like you can't like if someone comes and asks you, oh, what do you do, or what's something you're really proud of, like how far back am I allowed to go? Can I be like, oh, it's this thing I did, and they're like, oh, and it was like 10 years ago. I'm like, oh, I can't talk about that. I have to talk about something recent, right? Because you can only talk about recent peaks, and so, and then obviously, when I got to my 30s and stuff, obviously the things change. You think your mind thinks differently now, right? In my 20s, it was I was more, I guess, a little bit more influenced by the idea of peaking from society. Whereas now I'm like, okay, a lot of this is just BS. I'm sorry. Like a lot of this stuff is BS, and all of y'all are lying to us and everything's a scam. I'm just kidding. But I don't know if that's just part of growing up. And so now I'm kind of like, should I worry about peaks? Should I worry about big moments? Or should every moment I have be connected to everything like a tapestry, and I'm just kind of like going in one direction? And even if I, and maybe it's about how content I can be where I'm at regardless. I mean, that is the one thing I'm before I kick it back to you a bit, that is the one thing I want to master, and I haven't, which I'm sure most people haven't, is that idea of like, I'm fine where I am, wherever I am. Like whatever, whether I'm up or down, I'm happy, sad, like I can still be at one with myself, and be able to, I'm still working on it, obviously, but be able to be okay with wherever I'm at, so that it doesn't, like, I don't get in my own way, right? Because if you're in the way of being okay, then it's hard to get to the next journey or next, um, like, I guess you could say peak you can get to, although I'm no longer looking at it as peaks, right? And then also there's that extra part where sometimes, like, I don't know if like where you get what you want, but like you still have complicated feelings about it, right? Like it's like I really wanted something, I got it, and then I'm like, oh, and then it, like, not everything is as great as I thought, and I'm like, if it changes like that, then does that mean it's no longer, am I jumping off the peak now? Am I jumping off the mountain? Like, so that's a little bit about how I would think about that. But yeah, I do think we should be kinder to people if they're still living in the past or looking at the past. Like there must be, like, obviously there's something pulling them there that they haven't dealt with yet, and that's why it stays in their present, and they carry it with them. And instead of just learning from it and moving on, they are really like connected to that, right? And then some people do, like, there are people super popular in high school, and then after school they no longer are popular, and I'm like, does that mean it's the end of the world, or does that just mean things change? And a lot of our peaks have more to do with like what's around us and our emotions and popularity and money and where you are in your environment, and things like that. So that's a little bit what I would say to start about that in our individual quest with peaking. Yeah, I think, would you like to continue, and then I'll piggyback off of what you continue with?
Sure, yes. And I do like what you noted in terms of that mastery of being at peace with where you are now. And I think I would take that further. Like for me, I think now I can ask the question of like, what do peaks look like in my life? And I think for me, initially when I was noting that question, I was like, wait, have I had any peaks at all? Because I haven't been put on such a list of so-called validation of 20 under 20 or 30 under 30. And then I was thinking, well, would graduating from something or having a certain job title, would I for myself consider that a peak? And I reflected on that and noted, no, I wouldn't. And for me, I feel my peaks are the moments I can see in my life where there was a catalyst that pushed me onto the next level or the next chapter for my evolution or this journey in my life. So and for me, that resonates more with me because I can see more of like a moment in time where I needed to really heal or learn something or really take myself out of what I was dealing with. I see that as something that really is a milestone that then kind of paints the trajectory of, and that was the next step, which led me to these other experiences, compared to, well, when I graduated and got this, did that really also fully determine the trajectory of the next steps that happened later? And so for me, I feel peaks for me are more of the pivots, or the milestones are those pivots or inspirations or catalysts, which sometimes are through hurt and sometimes are through love, that I think are what determines the movement of my life, of which paths I take on my journey, or how those paths look like. So it's funny because for me, even though I can remember things of my past, of course, but I'm not someone who really speaks a whole lot about scenarios from my past. I kind of am more of like, I'm present and I have ideas for the future, as opposed to like remembering, and no offense, but like I don't fully remember names of teachers or classmates or coworkers. And it's not because I didn't want to or because they were so terrible. It's just like the person who I was in that chapter and who I am now is actually quite different. And so the I'm kind of always I'm still more in the now, I think, now than I was 10 years ago or in high school, when I think I was doing more past, future, back and forth. What am I doing? Especially, I think in my 20s also, there was a lot more of, well, in my past was this, and I should be here for that. But in the future, why doesn't it look like this? Like this kind of was going on and on and on. While in this chapter of my life, it's more of for me, it's more of wanting to maintain this quality of peace in the now, of like there's a piece of the unknown, because the present always has like an unknown factor to it, because technically we are the present and we define it however we decide to exist in this present moment, which constantly is, I always like to think of, wait, what was that movie? Doctor Strange. Is that the one where like there are a million and one different ways that you're going to get to this destination, and you could take any single one of them? You will still end up in the unknown destination, but it's your choices that is dictating which of the paths you keep on bouncing from as you're moving along. And I think I always loved that, or resonated with that, the way in which Marvel decided to illustrate that in the movie, because I felt like, you know what, I think that does have some truth to it for me when it comes to understanding the present is not so much about being still or stagnant. It's more of like really getting comfortable with the unknown and allowing yourself to discover. I think a lot of times when with this peaking, it's like your peak is like, you should know how to get to that destination, or you should know the future concretely or concisely or like fully. Yeah. But that unknown factor, I think, is that sweet spot that can get you more, or get you to receive more than you can imagine. But you have, like for me, I've noticed I've had to learn to allow myself to love the unknown about myself or about my present, so that these catalysts that occur, I've noted now, are no longer a complete like whiplash, I had no idea was coming, chaos, right? It's more of like as a catalyst of like, I understand why I need to have this experience right now. And I'm open to receive where it's supposed to take me right now. And it's not like, take the wheel, or, it's not like I'm not doing anything, but it's more of like, I'm being very conscious of surrendering and trusting myself while I'm moving within the unknown. So I think for me I feel that has allowed like previous versions of me to feel really proud of us. Because I think previous versions of me would beat up on myself at that time, feeling like I haven't accomplished anything yet, or I have nothing to show for all the effort I'm putting in. because of the notion, well, the peak needs to be these particular physical things. And again, there's nothing wrong with the physical things. We all deserve a very healthy bank account, a healthy house, a healthy lifestyle. We all deserve all these things in the physical and metaphysical and biological and psychological and emotional and all the other quadrangular. We deserve all of it. Yes. I do feel though that the feeling of it matters though. And I think to piggyback off of even the notion, like you noted, Damali, of those who we revered after they died, whether it's Mozart, Beethoven, Sir Isaac Newton, those sorts of people. And I would also question, like, well, that feeling of success, that feeling of peaking, did they feel successful before they left? Who are we to call them successful afterwards? What difference does it make if after they're gone, we are revering them or not? Does that really define the peak at all? Is there even a peak at all? Those are the types of things that make me wonder, like, so is it when you are no longer, it's not that you're no longer trying to succeed. It's like you now have a bigger picture of what success is supposed to be, where it actually has a lot more to do with what you are maintaining within yourself. That, like, how you're balancing that level, that standard of quality of peace, quality of confidence in yourself and the unknown, so that the changes as your paths keep on shifting with decisions no longer feel like the rug is being pulled underneath you. Is that the phrase? Now, granted, no one's ever pulled a rug. Has anyone ever pulled a rug on somebody ever? I don't know, other than in cartoons, but I'm just saying, but you get what I mean. So
I'm pretty sure it's metaphorical, but continue.
Thank you. So I would say for me, I'm not into insisting like, oh, peaks don't exist. We should throw it all away and success doesn't exist. We should all just be a plant. I don't mean, I don't mean that. Okay. Cause sometimes people be going a little extreme with claiming we should just stop everything that we're doing. I just feel like, and maybe this comes in also with the ideology of capitalism and how, you need to have something tangible to show for your effort, which must be the salary, the job title, the house, the car, what restaurants you can afford to go to, what kind of vacations you can afford to go on, and priding yourself of like, work hard and sleep is for the dead. I feel like the shifting that's occurring and the questions that we're all having about, do we need to continue on this ideological system that we've been on for a very long time? Is it serving us in the way we want it to be? And for me, I feel like there ain't nothing wrong with being comfortable financially, spiritually, intellectually, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The peaking part of capitalism that I have an issue with is where it comes in the form of exploitation. And when you need to exploit other people or exploit certain systems or exploit certain institutions in order for you to have your peak or maintain yourself and shift everybody else out to make sure you are the only one peaking, that's a problem. I feel there's more than enough room for everybody to feel successful. And so for me, I think the takeaway for me that I am sharing with you, if it resonates with you, of course, take what resonates. We are not here to tell you what to think or believe. But if we could broaden the scope, right? If we could try to embrace a bigger perspective about what our peaks as individuals and as a community collectively could look like, maybe we need to define that as, well, how do you feel successful? Can we add more to what would success look like in addition to these physical, tangible things to get us out of this wheel looping of anxiety, making it seem like we've run out of time because how could you not have saved the world by the age of 12? Like, what have you been doing with your life? That's a problem. And then don't even get us started with the conditioning, with the very restrictive gender roles also, where as a woman, your peak is you had kids. And if you haven't had that, well, honey, I mean, why are you a woman? What are you doing? Or the peak is you got married. If you didn't get married, what are you doing with your life? Like the peak is you left your parents' house. If you're still in your parents' house, what are you doing? Like these sorts of ideologies, which are very particular to certain parts of the world or certain cultures, because other cultures don't see a reason to kick everybody out of the house by a certain age, or don't see a reason to be having children only at a certain age. But anyways, when it comes to peaking, I think the overall notion I'm sharing with my own definition of peaks is that we can expand the scope of what your peak can look like. And I think a peak should bring about more of your evolution. So if the peak is figuratively or literally the top point of a mountain, there's always a taller mountain next to it. So the point of you getting to that particular the point of you getting to the first top of that mountain took some time for you to get there so you can see what's on the other side, because you can't see it from the bottom. But you are a different person now that you got to that top part to now get to the next mountain that's taller than the one you just came from. We can't necessarily move from mountain to mountain. Walk with me now. I know this is figuratively going everywhere, but we can't move from mountain to mountain if the peaking is restricted to a looping of an illusion of competition that is more exploitative than wholesome in a sense. So for me, I would note that I feel like because my peaks are more of like catalysts for healing, catalysts for change, catalysts for love, catalysts for evolution, I will continue having them throughout my life. It's not a point of, and I did it. Okay, I can go back to sleep now. Like it will just always continue. That's the point of me being alive, is to continue navigating multiple peaks, because there are multiple ways I'm getting closer to the unknown of whatever I'm supposed to be getting to in this lifetime. So for me, that is how for now, this will possibly change in another 10 years, how I've now started to understand how peaks align with me in my life.
Yeah, I like what you said about catalyst for growth, catalyst for evolution. I like that. I agree. I think any kind of quote unquote peaking should just be a catalyst or little stones that we use for the bigger picture. Because at the end of the day, that's what it is. Your whole life is not just one moment. It's not just one title. There's so much that goes into it, right? I mean, I know there is a safety sometimes in the title, right? And there's a safety too. Sometimes it's like this, not, I mean, the thought of like, oh, okay, well, if I just get married, I don't have to do anything anymore. Like if I get married, I'm done. I don't have to no one's going to ask me anything. No one's going to, and then also sometimes like having kids too can be an identity thing. Like I don't have an identity. So but if I have kids, that gives me an identity, kind of thing. But for some, for some people, and I understand that, right? Because yeah, when you're younger, you assume that you get this, you get married, you have the job, you get and everything. But my issue has been, what if you don't have those things, or what if the trajectory of your life doesn't really work that way? Then what are you supposed to do next? Like you have to figure out how to move, right? But if you see everything as a stepping stone or a catalyst for other things, then it doesn't matter like the things that help you go forward and the things that are setbacks shouldn't be bad. You should be able to react appropriately, right? Like I was listening to my horoscope, and I don't know, should we say the name of the person we listened to the horoscope from? I don't even know. Yeah, I don't know if she listened to this or not, but anyway, but it was my Leo horoscope, and like basically what it was something along the lines of like, how do you react when you don't get what you want? Like, how do you react? From I think it was from who was it? Was it the Quietest Revolution? I think. And he's like, how do you like when you don't get what you want? Do you become a brat? Like when you don't get the thing that you asked for is how do you what do you do? And like when you're not motivated, how do you move? And I thought that was very poignant because it's true. That's been my lifelong battle of like, if I don't get it the way I asked for it, or it doesn't turn out the way I wanted, how do I act? And sometimes I'm like, oh man, I've gotten better, but I get annoyed because I'm like, I did what I had to do, so why can't I get what I want? Damn it! So I can just like, like I got it, I'm done, right? But of course, oftentimes I get something and at first it's fine, but then it doesn't, or like it ends, or sometimes like or I end things too soon or not soon enough, and I can't really figure out when. So it's hard to figure out when was I right or when was I not. But I guess that's the point, right? You just kind of keep on going and you just kind of like figure it out, right? And I think that and I have in my obviously I'm in my 30s, so obviously the thoughts on like jobs and relationships and marriage and kids have gone like up and down, right? Because I'm a woman, so obviously it's hard. You can't not think about that or have people ask you about like someone's asking women questions that you wouldn't ask a man about or you wouldn't ask, but because you're a woman, oh well, what about this and what you know and my thing, I mean, thankfully for me, I've never it's for me I've never been a big like peer pressure type person. Like I don't do things just because other people are doing them. But I can understand others that do that because sometimes you feel like, well, this person is my friend and they're this age and they got this, so I have to hurry up and do the same thing that they're doing to, which is not bad. I mean, as long as you're happy with that, right? And I also think, make no mistake, like even when people are successful and do reach their peaks, it's not like it ends. And sometimes they have a bigger issue because like sometimes you've been doing something for 10 years and you've been successful, but you don't want to do it anymore. And people are looking at you like, what do it's like, you've been doing this for 10 years and you've been successful and you're making money and you have everything. Why are you leaving? What's wrong with you? Um, and I think that also that's another that can also be a prison, right? Because then you're like, okay, what the heck do I do now? Kind of thing. Like I want to change my trajectory, but I can't because people expect me to do one thing, and then, but what if you're not feeling like that's okay? And then sometimes like you feel like you wish you didn't have that thing. Like, of course, I have to bring up BTS because whatever. But there is a a song that BTS Namjoon had on his solo album. I think it was like Wildflowers or something like that, Flowerworks, I think. And like in the song, after reading the lyrics, of course, because it's in Korean, and he said something about I wish that the higher power would remove my desire for fame from me, or my desire or my talent from me, because this talent, like it started out really great, but then 10 years go by and all of a sudden like the talent I had ends up being kind of like a prison, because now it's like you have a certain talent and you have to do something a certain way, and now I want to shift and I don't know what to do with that, right? So it's like it's sometimes you want to like remove, like, God, just remove this thing from me so I don't have to be expected to do something in this way, right? Or this idea that like, or with people too, sometimes you really enjoyed something before. For many years you enjoyed something, and then something happens and you're older and you don't enjoy it anymore. But like you can't, it's hard to it can be scary to decide to do something else, right? Or if something doesn't work, because I've had with me and for friends too, where they've gotten into things that they thought it was one way and then it didn't end up that way, or they found out things later and they're like, oh, I don't, and there is, I feel like that's why with society it's because there's so much shame and mockery that goes around your peaks and what you do, right? Because there's shame with everything, right? There's shame if you're not married, right? There's shame if you're married but you don't have kids. There's shame if you want to get a divorce. There's shame if you quit a job. There's shame in and I kind of feel like there doesn't need to be. You don't. The life is movement. We're not supposed to be stagnant. It's okay to switch and move, and if you messed up thinking about something today, okay, and in a few years you'll figure it out and be able to think. Like for me, I've been doing some, I mean, I was already pretty good with some introspection in my 20s, but in my 30s I've gotten better with introspection, which is kind of annoying because then you find out more things. And as we know, like I remember, like I think it was Viola Davis who shared this thing on her Instagram where like how healing feels like. And like it was like a video of some girl on, those rides at Disney that are like the cups, those little cups you're in, I guess from Beauty and the Beast. I think they're from the Beauty and the Beast. And they're the cups that go really, really fast, and you like it at first, but then you don't. It's actually terrifying and you hate it. Like, I mean, I don't want to be here. Like, So yeah, so healing is not fun. Finding things out about yourself is not always fun because you have to like it's painful to like I've thought this way for so long, and then now I have to rip that thought out and think of it differently. And it's like, but of course, I've, had different thoughts about stuff, and how like sometimes like the way I thought about something in the past is different now. Like the way that I judge something, or the way that I looked at something, I was like, for example, a certain peak that I thought I had, or a success I had, but then at the time I thought I was okay, but then now looking back, I'm like, I wasn't happy then. Like the picture, like it looks like I'm happy in the picture, but I know I wasn't. Or I'm smiling because I got something I was supposed to get, but my eyes are not happy. My smile is there, but my eyes are dark, right? So I know, going all deep for no reason. Why do we do this? It's horrible. But yeah, but sometimes like when I look back, I'm like, oh, that was, and then sometimes I see moments where maybe I didn't have a certain, or I don't know, and then like I was happy with something. So I don't know, it just depends. Like you can be happy or sad about certain peaks, right? Like what just like, it doesn't necessarily mean that, but so I think it's more about how you feel about it. Nothing wrong with titles, and nothing wrong. I just feel like it should be when you want to, and it should be aligned. Like if you have a certain job, or you get married, or you have kids, or you go to space, or you do all of those things, it should be, you should feel good about it, and you should do your due diligence to be like, this is what I want, and I'm not doing this for all these other people. I'm doing it because I'm ready for it. This is what I want to do. And it shouldn't be, because like Dagny had said, the peak is not the issue. The title is not the issue. It's just the exploitation and shame and mockery and like forced stuff around it. That's the problem. I think it shouldn't be like a forced thing. It should be like, okay, I'm doing this because this is what I want, and I feel like aligned. I think oftentimes like we don't do that, and we use like things that we shouldn't, like the peaking thing where, oh, I have to be successful like this person, or like if I don't get to this finish line, then I can't do this, and also I think a good exercise is to not, you shouldn't, I know it's hard, but you have to train yourself not to care so much about what other people's ideas are about your peaking, or about what is good for you, right? I think that's the best way to deal with that, and I think that comes with knowledge, and I think with age as well, and because everyone is figuring out themselves. And often what happens too is that I find other people where you think their lives are perfect, or they seem perfect, and then you find out, oh, they're going through this thing or something. So everyone has their own stuff that they're doing, right? And yeah, and I think you should not be competing too much with other people. You should compete more with yourself and what you're doing. And also, I mean, I think competing can be fine as long as it's like in a more positive way. Like if you're like, oh, this person inspired me to do X, Y, and Z, so I want to work hard. Like my thing is like, you got to put the work in. You can't be like, oh, comparing yourself to someone, but you're not. You're just like, oh, you're just cursing out because how dare they? No, like put the work in. And funnily enough, the thing is, when you put the work in, oftentimes more than not, you forget about the competition, I think, because you're just focused on what you're doing that's good for you to get you to where you are. And then sometimes like, and what I've noticed too is that like, once you get the thing, all of a sudden you don't really care about everybody else now, because you're like, oh, I did what I had to do. Right. So I think that's how I've kind of thought about it. And to circle back to our skit about like the biggest thing was sixth grade and everything. At that moment in time, it was a big peak for me, but then life moved on. Right. And also I think I can go back to what Dagny said, where, yeah, there are certain past things I remember, but there's also a lot of things that I thought I would remember, but I don't anymore, like certain faces or people or things. And I'm like, what happened here? Why was I upset here? Why was this, and some things I've forgotten because I guess they no longer serve me, right? And so I think that, that's part of aging too, right? Right. So, and yeah, and so there's this, question about like we need to reframe the whole peak thing. And also sometimes I'm like, have I reached a peak yet? Really? Because I mean, okay, you could say, okay, graduations, okay, getting a job, okay, but my thought about it has changed now, right? I'm kind of like, when I was at my college graduation, yeah, that was a whole big deal, but now I'm like, is it a big deal now? Like, how does it? Okay, I got a degree, okay, like, So I think I have that thought too, where I'm like, have I peaked, or has just the way I view peaking or success has changed, right? And like the needs I have or what I want to do, right? And then also there's this thought of like having an idea of how I think success and peaking should be, and then the idea I have or the fantasy doesn't match my reality. But I don't know if that's like, do I have to change the fantasy part, or do I have to not have an idea about it and then just sometimes I think I need more action and less thoughts, right? Which, and also I can go back to a much older podcast episode where we talked about self-help books and my issue with self-help books, because I would be self-helping and reading the books. I would read all of them, but then I didn't do anything. So I was just reading books about people and, and this thing about like, because I too, I like, I mean, who doesn't like a great story about someone successful? I love reading stories about success. It's so fun, right? Like, oh my God, kind of thing. And it's much easier to read about other people's success than to do what you have to do to succeed, right? And so I found that, but yeah, I think we just and I also have to try, because I've gotten to an age where I don't care as much about people's stuff. I'm just doing what I have to do and move forward, and like, and also sometimes I'm like, people don't know my work ethic, like I don't know, people just see the surface sometimes, and like, you don't know, some people don't know how much work I'm doing on myself, or some people, like, you don't know what I've been through to get to this thought process or this whatever. You just see the, you're like, oh, well, are you going to do this? Are you going to do that? And I'm like, you don't even know what I've been going through, bro. Like, and you just, like, don't, the unsolicited information, just keep it to yourself. Okay. But I think that, that's part of it too. You need to, I mean, it's hard though, right? Because sometimes I can't sit there and be like, oh, I'm not affected by society. I live on an island. I don't. Sometimes, yes, one of the things I do feel like this pressure from society, and I'm kind of just like, get away from me, kind of thing. Like, I don't care, but society tells me that I'm supposed to care, and I don't, kind of thing. And but you really have to, and to be fair, there are ups and downs. It's a work in progress. Like, I think, it's a journey, the healing and the self. So it's a journey. Like, some days you feel really good about, you're like, I don't care, I'm doing what I have to do. And then other days I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to do anything. I just want to sleep all day. I don't want to do any of this. I don't want to figure out anything. I just want to read about other people's great stories of success or peaking and everything, and just like, or live vicariously through people, because it's much easier. And also, things change too. Like, I feel like I'm more aware of the world now and the way things are, and like how everything is like, not everything, but a lot of things are a scam. So I know that things that seem so real are not, right? I know that like there's so many politics behind stuff and exploitation, things that like are supposed to keep you a certain way, and like, because I mean, you need people, because like, if everyone could deal with their own healing and figure out all their stuff, people would get out of business for certain things, right? Like, if no one needed self-help books anymore, right? Or if no one needed like, there's certain things that like society sometimes wants you to be down about stuff, or they want you to feel shame, or they want you to feel anxiety, so they can sell you something like, oh, here, kind of thing. And so it's not just like, it's not just you. Like, it's like there's a whole system that is built to make you feel and think a certain way, so people can make money off of it or make something off of you, right? So yeah, so I think at the end of the day, it's not so much about the titles or about the peaks or not the peaks. I think it's more about how you feel. Like, so it's like, so even if like it's raining all around you, metaphorically, there's a bunch of chaos around you, versus when it's peaceful, you inside can still be peaceful. You need to be more internal and less, there's too much external things that are dictating the way you live your life. And that's the problem. When you're more in an internal thing, and you can kind of figure out a way to see things more objectively, I think that makes it easier for you to not care whether you've reached this peak or not. And how do you feel about that? If like, how, like, when you don't get something, or you don't get a peak that you, or a title you want, how do you use that to make yourself feel better? Or are you just down in the dumps and feel horrible about yourself? Like, how do you react when you don't always, right? Because if you can level that and balance that, so that whether good things, I mean, obviously I'm not saying you can't have emotions and feel things, but like, when you get what you want versus not, are you able to react in a slightly, like a similar way, right? Like, your emotions shouldn't be like it shouldn't be like an explosion and chaotic and freaking out and like, I don't know what to do with my life. Oh my God, like, it shouldn't be like, you should be like, okay, go through this and then write it down. How do I feel? What does this mean? Try to, analyze it, figure it out, use it. Everything that happens to you should be, I know I'm speaking, right? I know I don't follow all of this advice. It's still good advice though. I'm getting better at it, right? But think about things like when things happen and you don't get something, or even if you do feel competitive or you feel less than or more than, how do you use that feeling or that thought to help later? How do you use it as a stone to help you get to where you need to be, even if that's different, right? And we need to be more open with that too. Like, like I have a thought of where I want to be, but what if you don't make it there? Then what do you do about that? How do you shift that? How do you make yourself happy regardless of getting this thing or not getting this thing? And so I think maybe it should be less about I think it's more about your reactions to things. There needs to be more of a focus as opposed to the actual thing. Like the title is important, okay, but how do I react to that if I get it or I don't? And then if I don't get it, how do I get it or move on to something else? So it has to be a catalyst and it has to be keep on moving in a marathon, because if we don't do that, then we get stuck. And then if you get stuck, then you can't do anything, you can't fix anything, and you're just like Dagny said, you're a plant, right? You don't want to be a plant because plants can't move, okay? You want to be able to move, and so when things happen, you are okay. And also like be okay with, and if people have opinions, people are entitled to their opinions, but that doesn't mean it. Okay, if you feel a certain way about something, or you think that, oh, why did you give, not do that thing that you're supposed to, or why did you give that title, or why, it's okay, you can feel that way, but I'm working on it. I'm figuring out what I have to do. And, and I'm not saying it's easy. I know it can be hard. It can be painful, especially when you really, really, really work hard for something and you don't get it, or it's not what you thought. It can be difficult, right? Or you did everything you were supposed to, but the people around you or the things or environment around you didn't do what they should have done to help you, right? So I think that's important. Also, yeah, comparing yourself to celebrities, probably not the best idea, right? Because they have a whole team behind them. I think it's very rare for celebrities to be doing everything by themselves. I think that's very rare, right? I'm not trying to take away from their talent and all that stuff, but there's a whole team, there's a whole marketing thing, there's a whole like thing, and a lot of the stuff they're saying, like it's a script, like it's not, so we have to, you need to focus more on how you feel about things and how you react to things, and using every single thing that happens to you as a stepping stone. Every single thing that happens is a lesson. It's some way to help you later. It's some way to connect later, and be aware of those different connections that you can make. And try not to, don't stay stuck. And if you feel stuck, okay, what can I do about it? So I think that that's some ways, I guess. It's difficult. It's hard. I know it's not a walk in the park, obviously, but I think that's, if we can do that more, it would make it easier for us to, and also it will make us, one more thing, it will make us easier to celebrate other people and be happy for other people instead of always competing or shooting them down, or like, oh, well, but it's like, so when they get certain things that you don't get, let's say, or they get certain titles, you're not, you don't feel bitter about it. You can be happy or congratulate them or not care, you know what I mean? And just kind of move with your life and know that like everyone has problems, right? So I don't think there's anyone that doesn't, and even if some people have it more together than you, I'm like, well, I mean, how do we define that really, right? Because everyone has a different way that they do things. So what I'm trying to say is just focus on yourself, damn it. Like, this whole thing, just focus on yourself and deal with your stuff. Just kidding. But yeah, that's I don't know. I can't think of anything else to say about that. I think I've said it quite eloquently, possibly, maybe. I don't know.
Yes, definitely.
Dagny, continue. I don't know what else to say.
So yes, I think that is a perfect segue to pulling it all together.
And what?
Wrapping it up. Yes. In terms of connecting what solutions you can take from this as you're listening to both of us, there's no issue with having peaks or striving for peaks. We're more noting how you are defining those peaks for yourself, and whether or not those definitions are really serving you. And paying attention to a lot of our conditioning has caused us to feel like we need to be competing with other people, or cause us to feel like we're running out of time, or even cause us to not be able to celebrate ourselves or other people because of what we have been made to believe a peak should look like, or a milestone should look like, or what your timing schedule should be. So if this resonated with you, either both of our different journeys and understanding our own peaks, understanding how we do celebrate ourselves, or are still working on being at peace with where we are now or where we're going, please let us know. We love hearing from you and would love to also continue the conversation about this. I see a theme of like, we tend to always speak on, we have a few other episodes of how we need to redefine success. And the system we're in right now may not fully have the capacity to hold the new definition that success needs for all of us. And so I love how we're continuing to dive deeper in these different episodes of what aspects of success we need to start defining for ourselves and not just be in default autopilot mode for. So as always, we love hearing from you. So let us know. You can leave a comment wherever you are listening to this episode, or check it out on the blog post for it. And let us know how do you define a peak? What would be the most recent peak or most proud peak of your life? Or what peak are you striving for? Does this resonate with you in terms of wanting to redefine it or reprioritize it? Let us know. We love hearing from you, and we hope you enjoyed the conversation. I enjoyed the conversation, of course.
I did too. Yes.
Yes. And we will catch you on the next episode.
Yeah, stay loved, stay blessed, and good luck with using those peaks, or so-called peaks, or whatever the peaks are, as catalysts for growth and change and evolution. Okay,
Yes.
bye.
Bye. Take care.